What? Oh, mind me. I didn't realise we've even started. Could have told me. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. That sound engineer is going to cop it, but I don't mind telling you next time I see him. Welcome to Chess Comedy Books 45. Today I want to look at a few titles, maybe of some interest to you. All of them probably quite rich in middle game content. Not all of them particularly well known, but that's all the more reason to look at them, isn't it? The first of these is called Creative Chess. It's by an Israeli guy, I think. Let's have a look. Yes, I was right. Israeli chess master, prominent study composer, and original psychologist argues that you too can play creative chess. Well, that's nice. I don't know very much about this book. I have looked through it. Unusual positioning of pieces. Kovacevic versus Sirawan, I can say, 1980. I'm just checking that position. In case Mike Basman's watching, which he isn't. As you can see, White has a very developed G-pawn. Gone right up the board. So there you are. Carl Gorka would appreciate this position, because the winning move is to play your queen all the way back from d4, where it proudly sits, to h1, uncovering an attack on the queen, which promptly has no flight square. And black resigns. No surprise to me, here we have David Bronstein from Belgrade 1954 playing a move which he became famous for, and that is playing the bishop from h7 to g8. There he is. Walled up in the tomb. Have I done that? It's going to be hell to pay. If he plays that, the orchestra starts playing. I mean it. 10 central concepts: unusual positioning of pieces, unusual functioning of pieces. We can't function very much if we've warmed up pawns. Flexibility, goal-oriented thinking, removal of your own piece, reducing the importance of the time element, alertness to subtle differences, continuing calculation in a state of certainty, violation of theoretical principles, if ever you knew what they were anyway, absurd moves. And it concludes with the following statements. The book's concluding chapters contain a discussion of the essence of creativity in chess and its sources, a list of techniques for developing chess creativity, demonstrations of particular creative games, and a set of exercise positions for the benefit of the student chess player. I think that's rather nicely done, and it's not too much verbiage, technical terms and so forth. On the other hand, it's something different. I recommend this book. I recommend this book if you see it around. The next one is very similar in as much that I think that both the authors, as he rubbing the dust off of it, I think are from Israel, I think, once again. And also it's about unusual aspects of the game. He's interested in studies. I think he is. I can't quickly see. But this is an Everyman, and it's very likely to still be in print. It came out 6 years ago. Didn't realise it'd been out for so long. I really rate it. It's evaluating things differently, looking for ways of different slants on positions. Talking about getting drunk. Beer, evaluating things differently. Really? Yeah. I don't want to worry you, but the chapter on beer seems to go on and on. I'm not making this up. Look. There we are. Look at the chapter heading at the top. See? There's a game between T.V. Petrosian and S. Gligorich. I'm afraid that's not how you spell Petrosian, but I'm of the Bernard Cafferty school of thought. And here, just for a change, we have Nigel Short playing Timon. Or rather, we have Timon playing Nigel Short. And thankfully, it's not that King March game. If it is, it doesn't look like it. No, it's not. Timon and Nigel, I think, had quite a rivalry at one time. Yes, it has to be admitted. I haven't looked through this book for ages, but I know when it appeared, I instantly gave it some positions to consider. I instantly gave it a thumbs up, and I still would. There's a lot of work here. 7 games by Shirov. 5 games by Timon. And Ivanchuk absolutely stacks. Looks like about 20. I haven't counted them. And Carlson about 10. There we are. Play unconventional chess and win. The next is a completely different type of book. This is more for the people in the sharp end of the game. It's a selection of positions, and you simply have to work out what you do. I'm going to show you a sample page. It is by Mr. Richard Palliser. Richard is highly thought of IM, also editor of the magazine Chess. I don't know him. I don't think he plays that much. He might play a bit in the London League. Deals with different aspects, it's grouped by theme. So, for example, here's some endings. It's not too difficult to pick out, is it? This one here, say, black king, black knight, and scattered pawns for white, and a bishop. And the king. Here's the white king, here's the black king. There we are. And what would you do? White to play. This is an eagerly awaited follow-up to the complete chess workout, Richard Palliser's highly acclaimed chess puzzle book. Now he presents the reader with 1,200 new puzzles, every one checked for accuracy by the latest computer engines. It says, ideal for all levels of player. I would swiftly add, I don't think it's ideal for beginners. So looking through, I'm working through the examples because you don't have to give yourself a headache. So they get all the answers are grouped at the back like this. So you can look at number 604 or whatever it is, and it'll tell you the answer. But it's always best to try and work it out for yourself, like pretending it's a proper game. Now, I promised you some books by Danny Gormally, and here are 2. I don't want you to get upset. Here is a picture of a gorilla. It says, a year inside the chess world, insanity, passion, and addiction. And there is a picture of the author looking like a cheeky sod. And if he's listening to this, and I know he isn't, I don't mean that disrespectfully, I mean that puckishly. Daniel Gormally was born on the 4th of May, 1976. His peak rating was 2,573. Now you try arguing with that. International Grand Master since 2005. Former member of the English national team. In 2015, he tied for second place in the 102nd British Championships. And last time we had a British Championship, he and Adam Hunt were leading the commentary team. This has got a lot of reportage, in other words, diaries. And he admits to a difficult life. London was cold, not just cold in an icy, chill your bones from within, Arctic cold sort of way. No, the people were cold and it was scary. London seemed much bigger, much busier than when I was last here, and less forgiving. He lives right up in the north of England, Alnwick, I think. I formed the impression that in going up there, he felt obliged. These things happen. It's not for me to pry. Making rest days obligatory. Scrap 2 days game. Scrap 2 games a day and morning rounds. He says that he once played a game starting at 9:15. Horrendous. Depends what you were doing the night before, young man. You don't have to go out and piss. Scrap the zero tolerance rule. Time, trouble, mistakes on one of his games. Against James Cobb. His only claim to fame was being a member of the same club as I sometimes go to, even though I never saw him there from start to finish. Game against Dave Smurden. You couldn't get a more friendly, but also a more deadly opponent than that. And these are games from the Four Nations League, which is a large league set up in Britain, although other international players compete, which travels around the country and always throws up some pretty interesting games and also tough fights. There's no halving out with that. Lessons from history. The terrifying Gorm beast. I'll tell you something, Danny Gormally is a brilliant, brilliant impersonator. He can do John Nunn and Mickey Adams and Stuart Conquest and Jim Plaskett. I'm in touch with Jim and I said to him, have you seen what Danny has done? Oh, I don't always agree with it. I felt I think, this is somebody who, like myself, prides himself on a sense of humour. Well, he has got a sense of humour. Here is Danny playing against a very old friend of mine, international master Gerard Welling. So you can see, look at the introduction. Look, it's half a page of intro. Some books couldn't even be bothered to say what their names are. Or if they do, they put them backwards and then put their ratings about for every move or something. Is top chess dying? Well, with Caruana, it's immediately apparent that he's working with a computer a lot. Talking about St. Louis. I think the computer has a very strong influence on his play, but it influences it in a good way. It is very unpleasant for opponents. I think it is if you're playing a top Grand Master. You don't have to look upon it as unpleasant. You could look upon it as instructive and interesting. Oh, here's an interesting game against the late Steve Berry. Steve was one of these very, at the board, he seemed very relaxed, and he often wore a fairly smart jacket, and you always sort of thought he was asleep. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I don't mean he was dozy. I mean he was sufficiently relaxed that he woke up when there was something interesting in front of him, and otherwise he was just watching the game like you might watch the television or something. It says, I wasn't really suited to Facebook and soon got tired and eventually quit the site altogether. Yes, I do remember he would publish one or two things on Facebook which were a little bit hard to understand. It's not a crime, is it? Here he is playing MVL. I hate saying that. Vachir Lagrave. I'm afraid my French is about as good as my chess. And here is a game between Michael Adams and Keith Arkle, so they're not just games by the author himself, although obviously that forms the basis of so much and so much. Here's an interesting position in the Alpine Sicilian, which Mike Basman wrote an article about many years ago. I don't suppose Danny knows that article, but I will develop that by saying I don't suppose he needs to know it. It's quite interesting. It's in chess. I always like to look at stuff Basman has done. I think he writes very well. And I know that Gerard Welling and I think Steve Giddins, or maybe it's Gerard Welling and Basman himself, are writing a book at the moment. So I shall get that with interest. It's a game of Mark Hepton's. Mark blunders. It's not my game, is it? There's a game against Fodor. One of the many kind people who, when I was doing BCM, was a contributor. Well, thank you, Mr. Fodor. Here is a blindfold game, is it? No, it's not. No. Between Zeev and Michael Adams. Every time I say Zeev, somebody I know that knows about Russian says it's not Zeev, it's Zeev or something. Well, maybe it is, I don't know. Oh dear, here's something I'm going to object to quite strongly. Was Capablanca rubbish? How's that for a section title? Keith is much more militant in the views of these players, that's Keith Arkle, I'm sure, yesteryear than I am. He believes that Capablanca weren't up to much at all and would struggle to achieve strong IM strength if they were around today. Really? That's interesting. The incentive is gone. General rise in standards, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have filtered down to English chess. English chess is incredibly strong. What are you talking about? If you go back 30 years, it's much more tempting to be a professional chess player in this country. You had many more players to be played chess for a living. Mark Hepton told me that chess was much easier in the 1980s. Players like himself, Tony Costa and Julian Hodgson would go around in a car from tournament to tournament. A decent prize was usually assured. You didn't have the strength and depth that you have now. Yes, but Mark, you've doubled in age since that time. It says here, I just nod my head and sympathize. He is a sympathetic person. And I would have thought writing this book, and I'm coming on to another one in a minute, was of use to him. not just in terms of chess, but in terms of his life in chess, which is the majority, though not all, of his life. He returns to many tough games, top names. Talking about cheating. And here's his game against a computer. That's a blitz 10-minute game against Komodo 8 64-bit. And here's a game against the Irishman, Sam Collins. Sam did a bit of work for British Chess Magazine. I don't think he was very happy doing it. And here's a game by someone of about Danny's strength, Jonathan Hawkins. And once again, it's a game from the Four Nations League. And here he is playing David Howell. Talking about extending your career. It's a game of Kramnik against Giri, Kramnik against Beliavsky. Humans don't think like computers yet. Chess is ultimately escapism. Life is what really matters. And when you finally come to the realization that the possibilities of life are infinite and more fascinating than anything a game can throw up, then you become imbued with a sense of extraordinary power. Well, if that isn't a closing sentence worth reading, I don't know what is. And I'm still to understand, though possibly haven't looked properly. I have looked, of course I've looked, why there's a gorilla on the cover. The last book is also by Grandmaster Gormally. And it's called Play Chess Like the Pros. In other words, the professionals. What separates the greatest players from mere mortals? A grandmaster revealing thoughts on the modern game. Contains advice on many key aspects of chess. Covers the increasingly important role of computers. Danny Gormally is an experienced grandmaster. Oh, yes, he is. With many tournament successes. He has played for England and is a former British rapid play champion. Now, what do you see? Well, I'll tell you what you see. You see a gilded frame. And you see some very, very strong players from Carlsen, working all the way up to Morphy. Oddly enough, I can't see a picture of Steinitz. There's Bronstein all on his own. And there's Shirov all on his own. And there's a blue dot appearing on the screen, probably to tell me I've got this too close to the camera. Let's look inside. The double columns may appeal to you. It keeps things a little bit more organized, I think. Rather than, was that one double columns? This was published by Chess. It says Chess Evolution. Yeah, this is all across the page. See? It's got a centralized diagram and then it goes. Whereas with this one, it has diagrams, of course, and it has a split page. So you start here and then go all the way down to here and then start a new page. There we are, done in columns, 2 columns a page. Maybe this one is a little bit more analytical than the other one, which is more about psychology and the ups and downs of professional play. Heading is Gamblers and Grinders. I don't know which he considers himself to be. both probably on occasion, should occasion arise. He knows which hat to wear. He also knows at the start of the game what he wants out of it. Taking you on transwarp, I think that must be surely a name of the computer. Talking about various middle game positions. Talking about toilet gate, that was a while ago. That was Topolov, wasn't it? And Vladimir Kramnik. Because one of them went out to the loo and the other accused them. Or maybe his entourage accused him of cheating. This is very definitely not games by Danny. Although I'll be disappointed there weren't some. Oh yes, here is he playing against a 3-minute game. Against, as I said, transwarp. In this chapter, I will investigate some of the remarkable changes in chess world over the last few years. And he doesn't just list them. He doesn't just become an amateur historian. He puts the facts down as he sees them in context. Of course, that's why he's a grandmaster and not just an also-ran. He is one of the 40 or so English grandmasters. He goes back and gives a game of Morphe's. Well, we can all get fun at looking at Morphe's games, and if you're not strong, particularly tactically, and you're not too fussed about openings one way or the other, Morphe's games are very, very instructive. They're also very interesting. It's a game he played in 1997 at the British Championships in Hove. I remember that championships because you couldn't get up from your board without making a noise. So it was the same as that was put out during the war. The poster said, "Is your journey really necessary?" And here is a game against the great and late Tony Miles, playing against Danny. Tony was facing Danny, playing the King's Indian. It's a nice mixture. If you look at that page, you don't have to look in depth. It's a nice mixture of moves and explanations. And Danny is a man with a good sense of humour, but also he knows when to take things seriously. I would say he's quite an emotional man. Here is a Clarendon Court against Nashkovsky. I think Nashkovsky was frozen in time because I think he played in the Soviet Championship, the strongest ever, 1973. I could be wrong about that. This is a Clarendon Court, which was named after, or rather, it was named by Jonathan Levitt, because Clarendon Court is near to where he used to live, and it's a sort of a Dutch. I don't recommend it, but it is. It does generate some interesting positions, particularly at the very beginning. Here we have Danny Gormally against the great Angus Dunnington. I don't think Angus plays anymore. And here we are. Oh, it's the same game. Having won my first 2 games, I was brimming with confidence, and despite not even having a FIDE rating at the time, when he says FIDE rating, what he means is an ELO rating, I expected my next opponent, the experienced, yes, it is him, Noam Rashkovsky from the Ukraine, to be a temporary hurdle to my capture of the World Championship. I was already brushing up my speech. Well, Gaza, mate, you fought hard, but it was the King's Indies, hardly sound, is it? Unsurprisingly, my dreams were soon to be trodden into the dust. Well, nice to play someone of such immense experience. I hope it was an experience. Yes, this is it. He signs here, Durham, UK. So he was up north then. He says he was inspired to write this book when he was at Hastings. South London's finest. Morphy versus Carlson. Taking on Transwarp. The gamblers and the grinders. I said that, didn't I? Solving problems in the opening. Practical play and combinations. And then he gives the solutions to the exercises he gives. I can't think of a book which has more variety and interest, particularly if you want to know about current thinking, as opposed to a certain move in a certain position, than this. Really good. And let's look at the other volume. It's not a companion volume. It comes from a different publisher, but there's no overlap. So there you are. Well, thank you for listening. This is one of the longest ones I've done. I got rather carried away, didn't I? Good stuff. This has been Chess Comedy Books 45. I'm James Pratt, and you're not. Goodbye.